a little bit about this book.
Has aliens. It takes place in Lux series. For those of you who have read the Lux series, it takes place in the same world. If you haven't read the Lux series, you probably are going to get spoiled, but I feel like that's your fault, not mine. But it takes place 4 years after the events of the Lux series, where everybody now in the world is aware that aliens are real. They're living among us. They can look like us, but they are basically walking nuclear weapons if you make them very angry. And so when you read The Darkest Star, it shows how society is adapting to this, and kind of how we tend to fear and overreact to things that we don't know or understand. And then when the series progresses, obviously a lot has to do with Evie and Luke's relationship in their past. But just like the Lux series, when it was Damon and Kat, it becomes much bigger than them. And it was interesting how your book is about making a better you. It's the same thing with the series, how I think both the Lux series and the Origin series is kind of can be summed up to the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And with the Day Nautilus, originally trying to do something good with the having access to the aliens, and how that spins out of control.
So I have a question for you. In writing the Lux series, when did you know there was this whole other part that could be told, kind of its own series or an outgrowth of Lux?
When I probably wrote the last sentence in the final book. I don't plot. I wish I could. Do you plot?
Yeah, I'm not like a rigid plotter, but I have to do some.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the generic plotting. Like I understand like where I wanted the book to start, where I kind of wanted to end. But I wish I could plot more, because I feel like you would have less writing yourselves into a corner.
Yeah,
which happens. Yeah. But I knew when I ended the Lux series that there was always going to be potential for more, because I wanted to eventually write how the world reacts to knowing. I mean, I feel like in real life, if we found out tomorrow that aliens are real, it would be like panic. Even if there wasn't a reason, we would just be like, well, let's panic. That's what we do best. And I always thought that would be a great thing.
Okay, great. So I want to, from my experience with the book, I want to ask you a couple of questions. So first of all, I think you guys are going to know what I'm saying here. How do you write jerks so well? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. Is your life full of jerks, or is it devoid of jerks, and this is your chance?
The interesting thing is, it's like, one of the questions I get asked quite a bit is, which character of yours is most like you? And I'm always like, none. And then my friends were like, no, you're a little bit like Alex, and you're a lot like Damon in real life. And I mean, I'm not as big as a douchebag as he is. I mean, he's pretty extreme. But I feel like I like the banter, and I think that you can get really great banter when you have people who, for whatever reason, don't like each other, but also are kind of reluctantly attracted to one another.
Sure.
And there's a lot of fun, and I think when I'm having fun, it's better writing that.
Sure. So you need some friction, and a jerk prevents friction.
Yes,
if nothing else.
A lot of it.
Okay. And so speaking of banter, do you find in your personal relationships in life, you experience that, or is it that you get to distill it as a writer to the most charming version of it?
I don't know if I'll call it charming, but I feel like if you know me, I'm a pretty snarky person. I will say things sometimes, but I also have a filter, and I think what's fun about writing characters like Damon or Seth or Roth is they don't have to have a filter, and so they can just say things, and they can say things and you laugh, and if I said them, you'd be like, okay, time to leave.
Okay, so I'm going to just give you guys a few of my favorite lines that I tried to pick as spoiler free. Okay, so first of all, Luke's dumb t-shirts. Not a line exactly, but I love that. And I have quite a few dumb ones myself, so I appreciated that. Grayson taking a blow pop out no matter what disgusting thing or terrifying thing is happening. Very
those blow pops are really important to him.
I feel like there could be a Burning Shadow themed blow pop now, but it would be kind of gross.
Yes.
But that could be something interesting.
Tastes like regret.
Yeah. It's like vomit.
Yeah.
Too. I thought it was the best use of gigantic full-grown trees as weapons. So I'm not giving too much away, but that's you make a very good argument for getting a flu shot. So guys, I want you to look forward to that part. And also, as a Harry Potter fan, I felt like you had an alien version of Parseltongue. A little bit.
Oh yes, the Arams.
Yes. So and that she understood something that the others were not understanding. Yeah. So I really like that. But my favorite lines were, "If I were wearing pearls, I'd be clutching them right now." I really look forward to that. And then Luke saying, "I'm way hotter than E.T." And Evie pointing out that's not saying much. Speaking of those two, I feel like you keep this romantic, or dare we say sexual tension going for quite a while. Like, do you love torturing your characters and audience in that way?
I do. There used to be this really funny drawing. I think it was a GIF of somebody. It was like this head that was trying to push together these two other heads and make them kiss, and because they were just like, "Fine, just kiss already." And I like that. I think it comes from like watching like X-Files growing up, where it's like Mulder and Scully. You're just kind of like, kiss, you know? Yeah, like you just do it, and then the one when they finally do, she like passes out or something. I'm like, okay. But I think it's fun because I mean, me personally, you know, sometimes when a couple gets together immediately, it works. But I like to be like really rooting, you know, waiting for that to happen, and I think it just builds. And sometimes I think that is more tension, more sexier than the actual scenes where it becomes like where they are together.
Agreed, because then the payoff has happened.
Yeah.
Do you have in your mind how long it's going to take for a couple that you know will eventually get together, or does that just organically come as you write?
I think it's organic, but also, I mean, you know, it's organic, but a lot of writing is a formula. So, like, when you know you have X amount of books in a series, at least for me, like, you know by certain books, certain things have to happen, I feel like. And that's just for me, so it's probably the JLA formula, but it's also a formula that's in, I'm sure, many other books. But it depends on how many books are going to be.
Yeah.
One thing I don't like it when I read it, and I don't try to do it in my books, is I do not like it when it's the last book and they're now getting together finally in the last 80% of the freaking series. You know, because I'm just like, really? Now I can't see them together. Because what I like to see eventually too is them working together to fight the common, you know, goal, to achieve the common goal. So usually when I put a couple together, I don't then turn around and break them up, because I like angst, but then I have like this threshold of, okay, go find somebody else, like, really, guys.
If it's not working.
Yeah, like, this is annoying.
Interesting. So you like the full payoff of now we're working together as a team. So to me that also says that the romance for you is part of the story, but it is not necessarily the payoff.
No.
That's cool. So in this book, in this romantic partnership that is blooming, one partner, specifically Luke, can read the mind of the other. How workable really would that be?
How what?
Workable really would that be to have a romantic partner who could at will read your thoughts?
That would be terrible. I mean, to imagine, like, if you like fake laugh at something they said, and, like, I know you don't think that's funny, and you're like, oh, but I do, I swear. I think, and that was one thing. You know, the funny thing is too, is like a lot of the readers before The Darkest Star came out, that was one, because they all were like, wait a minute, can't Luke read minds? And a lot of people were looking forward to that because of, you imagine, and there is the horny octopus line.
Right,
yeah. And so he always has a habit of picking up, and this is something that's talked about in the middle of this book and in the third book, is Luke doesn't always read Evie's mind, but Evie, and if you've read the bonus scene story yet, Evie's very loud. She thinks loudly,
right?
So he can't help it sometimes. And when she's feeling like really emotional or really excited about something, it's like almost like
having verbal diarrhea, but you're not speaking it, you're thinking it, and then he can hear it. And it's kind of like always the worst possible moments that you would not want someone listening to your thoughts. But I think that would be terrible.
I agree. It would be horrible. But I like how you describe that some people who are used to being around people who can read minds have learned to obscure their thoughts or think of blankness or whatever. So maybe she could learn that.
Yeah, like deflection, basically.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to know the different hybrids, aliens, and so on that would populate your series? Like, did you see one at first and then it expanded?
Yeah, it expanded as I wrote it because I don't plot. It expanded really in the Lux series. And as the Lux series went, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if, they were experimenting and creating? And again, it started from a good place. The Luxan cannot get sick. They can't develop cancer. They can't catch the flu. And originally they were like, if we can somehow study, the DNA, the genetics, and be able to use that to better mankind, it started in a good place. But then, of course, people of money and greed and other goals got involved. But it kind of just kept going as I was writing about, okay, so, and then once I created the hybrids, I was like, okay, well, what if a hybrid and a Luxan had a child? What would that be? And then that's where the origin came into play, that they were born with the alien DNA already in them, and not so much, given a serum or anything like that. So.
And interestingly, as we sometimes say with like pets or so on, like when you take two different kinds of things and put them together, sometimes it comes out stronger or better than the original version. I liked how you were exploring that. So, but of all your different creatures, those different aliens, it seems like they all watch plenty of TV.
Because apparently I do.
And you really weave pop culture into your stories. And I was wondering, would real aliens watch a lot of TV if they came here? What do you think?
I mean, what else would they be doing? I feel like, if you want to get I feel like if an alien could travel here, they're obviously far more intelligent than we are because they have the technology. So I feel like they would get here and be like, well, this was a waste of time. And then they would be like, oh,
except
TV. And I feel like they would probably watch that. I think they would.
I think you're right. Or they may reluctantly at first, but soon be like binging 13 Reasons Why.
Right, yeah. And they would just be like, I can't
realizing.
turn this off.
Exactly.
And then I feel like they would also stumble across reality TV, more stuff reality TV, and just not be able to ever turn that off.
And maybe think that represents humans in a way that wouldn't reflect well.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, staying on the topic for a second, what are you watching now that you love?
Since it's been really hard lately because when my Sunday nights for the longest time was obviously only for a couple months, was a Game of Thrones night, and we're not going to talk about
The third episode.
The third episode was amazing.
I pretend that's the end.
Yeah, I do too. I play Game of Thrones a lot in the background when I'm writing, and I stop at last season, episode 3. Well, I will skip ahead to the one season because I was like, has everybody seen it?
At this point, it's up to them. Come on.
I'm not gonna spoil the big thing, but when let's just say when Westeros gets his butt handed to it, I'm like, yes. I'm like, these dumb people. Cersei, did you all forget when Cersei blew up the Citadel and a giant Liberty Bell smashed some people? I didn't forget that because it focused right on that. The thing blew up. Cersei will protect me, okay. But no, I would watch Game of Thrones. I watched The Walking Dead. I'm starting to get a little, I don't know with it because so many people are leaving and they spoil it because they're like what they did with Rick, 6 more episodes until Rick either dies or leaves. And I'm like, okay, who cares now? And so now Michonne's leaving, which I'm like, okay, I only did one or so episode of, one season or so of Fear of the Walking Dead.
Yeah.
I was very mad about that.
They just killed everyone along the way. They caused everybody to die.
Yeah.
That's what I felt
Well,
like.
and also I felt like there was such a huge opportunity because how every books and movies, when there's any type of apocalyptic situation, dystopian, they never show the breakdown of society. And I was so excited about Fear the Walking Dead because could you imagine in real life, like these weird things are happening everywhere and no one really knows what's going on. I'm sure, you know, we would completely be lied to and told everything's fine. That person's not eating that person's fat. It's bath salts. And, you know, and then meanwhile, no, that's not bath salts. But they had like what, like 2 or 3 episodes?
Yeah.
And then it was, I mean, I was so disappointed in that because I felt like you could go on seasons just showing the breakdown of the government. And to me, that would be the scariest thing to live through, knowing there's no police coming, there's no ambulance coming, there's no everybody has completely lost control. And they just skipped right over that into basically The Walking Dead season 2. But at a, you know, in a place where somebody was keeping walkers in another place. I mean, it was like, okay. I've also been watching, I watch a lot of really weird stuff. I love Monsters Inside Me. You guys watch that? Oh, it's about bugs. But it's about like parasites and things that can affect you. I find it fascinating. I also watch air disasters.
Why?
I find it very reassuring because it shows you how that should never happen again. Unless it's a plane that's still missing, I guess. But it shows, I mean, it's actually very interesting too to see how, I don't know how anybody survived flying when it first started, because they were just kind of like, they literally had this basically look and avoid. That's what the pilots would do. If you saw the plane, you avoided it.
Well, or fewer at least.
Yeah,
Fewer planes.
yeah, but guess what? It did not work out well for them. But you know, so I watch that. I watch Forensic Files, especially when I'm traveling. I get very mad.
I think you referenced that in this book.
Yes,
a few times.
Oh,
Yeah.
and BuzzFeed Unsolved is I am obsessed with them in a creepy way. I'm like Ryan in the sense that I don't believe everything Ryan believes. I think Ryan believes, like, I don't know, probably a snake monster if he went to investigate it. But I also love Shane's personality. He cracks me up. Have you watched BuzzFeed Unsolved?
No.
Oh my gosh, it is so funny. It has a person who believes in everything and who is scared of everything, and that's Ryan. Shane believes in nothing but aliens. And he's scared, so he doesn't believe it because he's not scared. And they will go to like these really famous haunted places sometimes. And they also do BuzzFeed Unsolved True Crime. And
I think I've seen a few of those.
yeah, but when Shane is like, he say all the time, he's like, "Hey demons, it's your boys." It cracks me up. I couldn't quote that show that I've been watching.
All right. Well, so clearly some of those not only inspired you, but are literally in your book.
Yes.
But do you find stuff that doesn't end up in your book kind of gets you thinking on certain topics, or even your frustration with like Fear the Walking Dead will spark something you'd like to write better?
Well, you know, it's funny that you mention it. There is something that is referenced in The Burning Shadow that does have to do, when you said something about an argument for flu shots. There is something that's going to come from that. And you know, if you could imagine, okay, a good example would be if you ever watched or read Stephen King's The Stand, Captain Tricks, right? Is what they called it. So, you know, if I'm going to do something like that, I'm going to show the actual breakdown of everything. So, but that might be getting a little too spoiling. But yeah, that probably would be directly inspired by what Fear the Walking Dead did.
Right, totally. By the way, there's this HBO show called Years and Years, which is what you said, but not with aliens or science fiction. But it's essentially 10 years from now. It goes year by year, and it shows the breakdown in society, like how it would really happen.
Oh wow!
When you show up at a bank and it's closed. When you
It's like that show, I think it was on History, where it showed how long cities would basically be taken over by nature. And it was like frighteningly quick how the cities, because people don't realize, like New York City, it's just cement, but they don't realize how much goes into keeping everything like that. And it was within 5 years, they were like, it would be virtually unrecognizable at that point. So, wow. Yeah.
Well, do you believe that aliens are out there?
I believe that the universe is so vast, there would have to be something. I don't think they look like Damon Black. They probably look like the insects from Independence Day, and they're gonna kill us. I mean, that's our luck. I do think
Not if we kill them first.
right? Because that's also a honor. But you know, there's that big satellite that repeatedly sends signals out into the space. Yeah. And every time I hear about that, I'm like, if Hollywood has taught us anything,
It's so dumb.
something's gonna respond, and we're gonna live to regret it. When it comes here, and terraforms our Earth.
Totally. They're like, you look great. Thanks
Yeah,
for the invite. So I, like you, believe that there's got to be something out there. I mean, just mathematically.
Yeah.
But do you believe aliens are already here?
I do. I mean, I don't know if they're already here, but I do think if there was a crash like at Roswell or something like that, I do believe the government would cover up, and it's because, again, we would panic. We would not handle this information well. I mean, we don't handle most things well. So, I mean, again, we'd be like, oh no.
But is that because they keep it from us until it's just in an explosive
Well, yeah,
state?
right.
So
And
of
then we're like,
course we're going to panic.
hey guys, there's aliens and they're about to attack us.
And they're actually surrounding every city, right?
Right, like in Independence
Yeah,
Day, when the
exactly.
president didn't even know Area 51 was real, and they're like, well,
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, like-
President.
it's there.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to turn it over to some questions soon, but I want to do a lightning round. That's cool with you. So just whatever comes to your head.
I'm always the worst at this.
Okay. We'll see. What is a must-have for you when you're writing? Chocolate?
No, coffee.
Coffee. Okay, good. Do you have a must-not-have when you're writing?
People talking.
Okay, fair enough. Favorite book of the moment?
That is definitely a hard one. I just read Reaper by Larissa Ione. It comes out, I think, next week or before, after. I loved it. It was great.
Great. Favorite zombie movie?
I would have to say probably Shaun of the Dead. It just made me laugh.
Good. Favorite vampire movie?
Oh my gosh.
I feel like don't overthink these. Just like what
No,
comes
I'm
to your
trying
head.
to. Well, there was, but it's a terrible movie.
That's even better.
I've written, but I liked it. It was what was it? Dracula 2000. When we went to New Orleans.
Good. I'm
Daisy
taking it.
Fuentes was in it.
I'm taking that. Favorite movie featuring aliens? I didn't want to say favorite alien movie for fear you would think it had to be in that.
No, I would have to probably say Independence Day since I keep referencing it.
Love it. Okay, good. Most romantic moment you've ever written?
Well, I think it makes me honestly think of this series when I think of when Luke reveals like everything that he's done for Evie, and then you see more in this book, and in the third book you learn more.
Great. And least romantic moment you've ever written?
Pretty much every single thing.
I'll take it. Is it true you've never eaten an apple pie?
True.
What?
No.
And yet they're all here to see you.
I know,
Amazed.
right? Just something about the consistency of the apples, and even growing up, I did not like layered food.
Okay.
My mom was Sicilian, so she would also make lasagna, and somebody once was like, why would you even think that? But I was like, you would never know what was in the layers. And
All right, good. And finally, if we were to look at your Google search history,
Oh.
what is the scariest thing we'd find?
Oh my God, there's so many. I am probably on so many watch lists right now. It's not even funny. I like the one thing, interestingly, was like a lot of, I don't know if you guys realize this, but Mount Weather is a real place, and I thought that was common knowledge, and apparently it is not. It was just like one of the bunkers that they go to in case DC is attacked, and I was like, well, I mean, it's right there, like not too far where I live. I'm like, how do you not know? Probably the scariest or the weirdest or the stupidest thing I ever searched once is because I saw people referencing, oh God, how many youngins do we have in here? It's something called hentai something. And I was like, what is this? And I googled it, and I was like, holy mother of God. And if you have not, I would suggest an incognito window, but that's not really at the end of the day. But I was like, what is this? And I googled it, and I was immediately like, well, that's going to be forever in my laptop. Good to know.
Okay, great. That was my last lightning round question. Guys, what would you like to know from Jen?
Don't be shy, because if not, we're just going to stare on
I have lots more questions that are less interesting.
Are you writing a book with Zane? Is it Zane, Zaf, and Layla?
From the Dark Elements?
Yeah.
It's Zane, Layla and Roth are in it. It's Storm and Fury. I think she has it. Right here. It came out in June, and the sequel.
Did I miss something?
Yes, it came out in June. There you go. Now you have another book to read. It came out in June, and then the sequel comes out in June of next year. It's called Rage and Ruin. You'll see Roth and Layla, and then you'll meet a new character named Trinity in that. Yeah.
Have you considered writing a book in Luke's perspective, from like you did in the movie?
I mean, I'll never say never. I do feel like his book would be hard with the fact that he can read minds. It would be me having to constantly remember that he can read minds. But maybe one day. I do like doing bonus scenes in his POV because it's like a nice little break going in and doing that. I'll say, like, once I started writing Damon's POV in Oblivion, I immediately regretted that life choice. Because when it's in Kat's POV, Damon's behavior is a mystery to you, Kat, me. And then when I did his POV, I then had to justify everything. And I was like, oh my God, like, who thought this was a good idea?
And you knew the answer.
Yeah, eventually it was me.
Cool.
Jen, will we get to see more of Hunter?
Actually, Hunter is a lot in the third book.
Yay.
Yes, you will see quite a bit of Hunter. You saw one of his brothers briefly in The Burning Shadow. But you will see Hunter and Serena a lot. And there is a showdown between Hunter and someone. And if you've read The Burning Shadow,
Not yet.
who has read it all the way through, then you could probably figure out who the showdown is with. Yeah. I mean,
Do you
things
have
turn.
do you have a title for the third one?
Yes, they haven't released it yet, but it's. I let it slip like the first night. So, again, if you finished it, you might guess it. It's called The Brightest Night, and you learn in the very last chapter why the darkest star in the burning shadow, and what that means.
There's a question over here.
So you read a lot of cliffhangers. Do you ever finish a book and you're like, ooh, that's a little bit too
Too neat.
mean?
Oh, mean. Well, so, some people's idea of cliffhangers and then my idea of cliffhangers are two vastly different things. Like, I don't think The Burning Shadow has a cliffhanger. I think it ends with you finding out something and you want to read more. To me, a cliffhanger is when lives are in jeopardy, some bad stuff just went down, or something crazy just happened, like Opal. And so I remember people being like, Onyx is a cliffhanger. And I was like, no, it's not. And they're like, yes, it is. So I was like, I'm going to give you a cliffhanger. No, but Opal was like the book where I avoided the internet for 6 months. But no, yes, I have written a book that isn't a cliffhanger. I don't think it's a cliffhanger. It has not come out yet, but I think that y'all are going to be like, I hate you in a nice possible way. I just hope everybody always trusts me that, I will give you a good satisfactory ending. But there is a book coming out that, is eventually that will have, well, actually there's 2 of them that will, that will have, quite of a gut punch at the end. But if you've read any of my series, I have, again, a formula. And I actually learned this from reading something Josh Whedon had said about seasons. And when I have books that go longer than 3 series that go longer than 3 books, in the 3rd book, I always kind of undo everything that's come before that. And that's why I think he was so good at keeping series, fresh. I think Supernatural is another one where that's why that series is so fresh, is because every so many seasons they just undo everything, and as long as it makes sense in the world you created. And so if I have a 5-book series, you can guess that 3rd book is going to undo quite a bit.
Because what is the game
Yeah.
in the last book then?
Yeah.
Interesting. And I'm going to insert my own question here. How do you write so many books?
Well, I don't have a life. No. I don't write as fast as I used to. The fastest book I ever written was Obsidian. I wrote that in 7 days. It also required 60% rewrite because of that. Wait For You, I probably wrote in 20 some days, but I cannot write that fast anymore.
Doesn't include editing, you're saying?
No,
Or
yeah,
other
no,
drafts?
just
Okay.
first draft. I don't have kids, so that helps. I think if I did, I probably would no longer have them. Someone would take them. But I don't know how writers do it when they do have kids. I find it hard having a husband and having dogs that are constantly wanting, attention. And I'm like, I need to work.
Yeah.
But no, I write probably 10 to 12 hours a day.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I loved the Obsession book. Do you think you'll ever go back and write more Arrow books?
I might eventually. I think you'll find out, if there's some things that happen in the 3rd book. But I've been thinking about that, going back and maybe, I really like even if I didn't do the brothers, Lotho, I think was his name. He lived underground. He would be fun, I think, to write a book about.
Yeah.
So you've written a lot of great books about different sorts of, fantasy creatures, elements, the fae, the descendants of the Greek gods, all those stuff. Do you have one that you haven't written yet, or that you plan on written about a certain type of fantasy creatures?
Yes. I'm actually writing that now. I can't say what it is yet. But I will say it's one of the things there's 3 things I always get asked if I'm ever going to write. I'm not gonna say 2 of the ones that would be likelihood, but one of them is always mermaids, and I'm like, look, guys, mermaids are never gonna happen. I like mermaids, but many of better writers have attempted to do mermaids, and I don't know what happens. It's just no one gets on that boat. But it's one of the things people have asked before if I would ever write. And I've had an idea since 2015, 2016, and I finally have time to do it, and so I'm writing that now, and I'm having a great time writing it, and I hope that continues. But as you know, sometimes you're like, this is the greatest thing ever, and then you get 10 chapters in, and you're like, this sucks.
Sometimes if you keep going, you're like, no, this is the greatest
Well,
thing
I
ever.
call it mid-book crisis.
Yeah.
When you get to the middle part of any book, no matter how many books you write, you're like, this sucks, this is terrible, and I want everybody to die in this book. and then you come out of it eventually on the other side, and then you get edits, and then you're like, oh, this wasn't so bad. Sometimes you need distance.
Yeah. Yeah. A friend sent me a little scale of emotions regarding any creative process.
The pain scale?
Sort of. But it was regarding any creative process, and it started out with I'm a genius. This is the best idea. This is the best idea ever. And then it was this is tricky. This is hard. This sucks. I suck.
Yeah. And that's literally every book.
And then at the end it's no, maybe this is good.
Yeah.
So I feel if you're not hitting some of those.
Yeah. I feel like you almost hit all of them every single book. And again, I feel like no matter how many books you've written, you think it gets easier, and then it seems to get even harder. Because I do feel like with every book you write, you learn something new. And
so you have sort of the weight of your knowledge when you write the new one.
Yeah, because I do miss the beginning writing where I just didn't know any better. And I wasn't, I never thought anybody would read anything. So I was, I didn't have the internal editor's voice. I didn't have readers' voices in my head. I didn't, I do miss those days.
Yeah. More questions, guys?
Have you ever written 2 books at a time, or gotten away from a book and gone somewhere else and then gone?
No, I can't do that. And there are authors who will write 1 book in the morning and then start writing another book in the afternoon, and I don't know how they do that, because I feel like it takes me the entire morning to even get my head into the right, okay, I got this. And I can only work on 1 book, and I cannot stop and even do edits on another book, because you end up, especially if you're doing edits on 2 fantasies or 2 paranormals,
Yeah.
it's like then you start combining the worlds accidentally, and so that can get tough, like trying to manage or juggle that when an editor sends edits to you and they need it turned around like in a ridiculously short period of time.
So even if you push pause on a book and have to work on another one, do you find that hard?
Yes, and that's going to happen when I get home. I'm sure I'm going to have edits on Rage and Ruin. And so what's going to happen is the chapters I've written on this new book, I'm going to have to start already at the beginning and read through. Just because I can't pick up.
To reorient yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Question over there?
Yeah, it was about the darkest star, and I don't know if spoilers are cautioning on that anymore.
Well,
Just treat others as you would want to be treated.
How did you feel writing the villain?
Oh,
Because
I was like hee hee hee. Mainly because so many people are like, oh, what happened to them? And I'm like, well, you're gonna find out. Not pleasant. But no, it was actually kind of sad too, because it was like, again, these were people who were kind of victims of their circumstance and victims of what they were created to become, and no matter what Luke attempted to do, he couldn't fix them. Like, he couldn't make them okay. And he had to do he had to make a terrible, horrible choice, because the villain and the villains previously of them, they were extremely dangerous. It was like you couldn't just let them go into the world. And so I think it was also sad to realize that I was going to have that as the villain, because when I started writing, I wasn't sure. And then I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, sad, but also.
Any more questions?
So in The Darkest Star, you always say that Luke is the most powerful, dangerous origin. Do you challenge that?
Have you read any of the Burning Shadow yet?
Not yet.
Oh, you'll
Not
find
yet.
out by the end. You'll know the answer. Yes. There is something that is the absolute most powerful thing, and it's pretty badass. And this thing can literally tear flesh off bones with their thoughts, and that's coming. So yes, and so it's I think Luke needed to be knocked down off the pedestal.
I think you did that quite well.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And it was also that was also one of my favorite scenes to write, just because his everything about that I really enjoyed writing, except for that one part.
I feel like his arrogance wasn't evident there. He put that aside.
Oh
in
yeah,
that
he
scene.
wasn't.
thought
I mean,
that
he knew.
that
He was
yeah.
like, oh, this is bad. And that's what I like about Luke is, he's also really funny, and he wears these funny T-shirts, and he has these terrible pickup lines and these terrible puns. But the same, you never know what he's going to do, and that includes taking out a city block. And but he also, even though he may sound arrogant, it's truly not arrogance. When stuff really comes down, he knows what he's capable of, and then he knows his limitations. And I that's one thing I really like about his character, is I don't think he would ever foolhardily rush into something thinking, I got this, when he knows, when everyone else is like, no, sit down, and he wouldn't do that. I thought about Game of Thrones reference. We've been watching that too much. Like what is it, the Battle of the Bastards?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he runs. And everyone's like, no.
Right. Still did it. Yeah.
So, but who wouldn't know at that point? How much time do I left?
I don't know, guys.
No, 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes.
You watch a lot of TV shows. If there was a chance, would you write on any of those shows?
Would I write on any of them? Of course. No, that's not true. I can't screenwrite for the sake of my life. I would attempt to do that, and they'd be like, no, thanks. Nothing's coming. Though, the funny thing is like the younger readers of mine, I can't tell you how many times I've had people be like, oh, I started watching Supernatural because of you. And I'm like, first off, what is wrong with you? But also, can someone let Supernatural know that? So I would love to, in my dreams, but I wouldn't be good at it. Screenwriting's a totally different form of writing, and it's interesting watching people who screenwrite first, then go into doing novels, and I think that would be easier because you get to flesh things out. But in screenwriting, you got to distill that down.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could do that.
Well, even just like a novel on those shows.
Like a novel?
Set in the world of those shows.
Oh,
I mean,
oh yeah. I would like to do. And I feel like there's a couple shows that I could do that on. You know, I would love. I mean, I'm surprised Supernatural never got them, especially because they had the books on the show for a while. But I would love to do that. I wish. I was gonna say. Oh my God, I'm not gonna even say what I was just thinking. It was so dumb and not thinking. I'll admit to it. I will admit to it. Oh my God, I can't believe you're gonna admit to this. But I was getting ready to say, I wish Game of Thrones. And I read some of the earlier books. I just totally
wish
forgot.
the way they wrote it in the show.
Yeah,
would go
right.
back
I'm
to the
curious
author.
how his version of it's gonna play out.
I mean, if you even-
he says it's gonna be different, but I don't think it's gonna be finished. I'm giving up on
Ever,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, okay.
Well, speaking of that, can you talk about any of your novels that are being adapted?
I can't. There is stuff happening actually, and it's funny. We had a flurry of activity this week because I'm on tour. Why not? But there is something. There are some things happening, and hopefully you cross your fingers. One of them I've never spoken about, and so it's because I couldn't. So maybe that will happen. There's another one that might happen, and then there's another one where I have read the script on, and that was a long time ago, and they just emailed this week asking about any notes. So that usually seems to be like indication that.
It's moving forward.
But I don't want to say anything until like someone calls and says it's in production, because you know, I think you have literally like a 1% negative 1% chance, I feel like, for that truly to happen. And it's you know, you get a lot of readers, I think, excited and hopeful, and then it just falls apart.
We've all been there.
Yeah, and it's, you know, so, you know, if you hear me talk about it, it's because either they're fairly confident that something's about to happen or it's happening.
Great. Well, I think it's about time for the signing. Is there any final question?
So with your last two books, I feel like they've been a lot more steamy with the scenes that you're having. Where do you like draw the line when you're writing YA? Because I know you write a lot of adult too. So.
Well, I don't really draw a line. What I don't do is, if you read my adult stuff, I don't name body parts in my YA stuff, which makes it hard actually to write those scenes, because you have to get really, yeah, I know, right? I was like, no one's gonna say that. But it actually have to get really creative, and what will happen sometimes is I'll get like an email from like a really young reader who asks me what happened in that scene. And I'll be like, what scene? You know, I feel like I just like walked into a trap. And then they're like this, and I'm like, oh, if you don't know, and I don't say it in a bad way, but I'm not gonna explain that to you. Like, you'll maybe learn one day. And but interestingly enough, in The Burning Shadow, I had gotten an email from my editor because there was a scene that they were concerned about, and about whether or not that it could be published in its entirety. And it came after another scene that I thought they were going to have the biggest problem with. And I was like, wait a minute, and the difference was, in one scene, Luke initiated something, and in the second scene that they had a problem with, Evie initiated something. And the first scene with Luke was far more detailed. And when I say graphic, it wasn't like, you know, we're not talking X-rated, but it was far more detailed, far more graphic, and her scene wasn't. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would you have a problem with that one? And I was like, y'all might need to think about that for a second. Yes. Sounds like a double standard here. Yes. And I think that we should be celebrating that, you know, she's taking ownership of like what she wants and is comfortable doing, instead of questioning it. And you know, and my editor was very, very like open. She was like, because even she was like, wait a minute. She was like, you have a point. She was like, I didn't even think of that, because I really thought they were going to pull back on somebody I think had their hands up. Yeah, so you probably know what scene I'm talking about with Luke. Yeah. And so I thought that was going to be the scene, but no, it's the one with Evie. And and it's still at the end of the day, the actual publisher had to read the book, the scene, to approve it. So I was like, that's embarrassing. That your publisher has to read the scene and be like, is this appropriate? And they were like, yes, but they're like, you're probably never going to see this in a school library.
You're pretty PG in your use of. I mean, I thought you.
Yeah, I do. I don't like, you know. There's it was in the Lux series. I was confident in one of the books that not the editor, but like one of the copy editors was just searching out certain words and flagging them. So what I did in one of the books is I used, like, for example, they do not like the word thrust of certain things. But you can be like, hips have rolled, they cannot thrust. I don't know why. So I use the word thrust for every other thing. Like, he thrust the door shut. And so I did, because I was convinced. And guess what? She flagged those words as being inappropriate or like being concerning. I was like, oh, thrusting a door shut? I was like, yeah, you're searching and finding, and I got you. No, but yeah, I do think I try to always keep the young readers in mind. But at the same time, it's like a lot of younger readers. I mean, they're watching like CW, they're watching Freeform. What you're seeing on TV is going to be far more detailed than what you're ever going to read in one of these books.
Well, they're also just going on Netflix and watching what their parents are watching.
Yeah, and you know, and one thing I've learned is that some of my readers are not ready for that, and sometimes that's not the young ones. It could be the older ones. They just kind of skip over that part, and it doesn't lose anything from the story. So. I also try to trust the readers that they know, and then when parents ask, I always tell parents, I'm like, you need to read it first. Like, I can't gauge that for you.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Great night.